It is my pleasure to attend this event, which will discuss the EU Eastern policy in the light of our Slovak Presidency, and I would like to express special gratitude that goes to the Slovak Foreign Policy Association and Friedrich Ebert Stiftung for partnering with us again and putting together this wonderful conference. The EU has been facing a whole spectrum of serious challenges, both internal and external, with security moving more and more to the front. Yet, I am strongly convinced that those challenges give no reason for decreasing our attention to the Eastern neighborhood. On the contrary, the security, stability and prosperity of the EU and our neighbors are interdependent. We therefore must be supportive of success of our Eastern partners. When we support them, we equally do support ourselves. The circumstances in which the Eastern Partnership works have changed. We face a stronger differentiation among partners, fading political attractiveness of the program, 3 partners reaching their political limits, and other 3 declaring different priorities, and we have more assertive Russia. All these aspects lead to a single conclusion. We must adapt to the new situation in order to survive and flourish. More flexibility and more creativity is desired. The highest challenge we face nowadays within the Eastern Partnership is to determine where and which way to direct the program. A new political vision must be based on the acknowledgement that a stable and prosperous Eastern neighborhood is of our strategic importance. The Eastern Partnership must stay very high on our agenda. It is a matter of our credibility as well. With this understanding, the Slovak Presidency pressed for an extended and sincere internal EU debate on the future of the Eastern neighborhood. Engagement of the Eastern partners in this debate is for us a must. On July the 7th, an informal meeting of EU Ministers of Justice and Home Affairs and the Eastern partners took place in Bratislava. It was focused on key areas like fight against corruption and reform of the justice system. The format in which it was held, the EU Troika, EU institutions and the 6 Eastern partners, provided an opportunity for a very informal and practically oriented dialogue. From the perspective of today's conference, the second EU Eastern Partnership Ministerial organized in Bratislava was probably of even higher interest. The informal discussion of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, the EU High Representative Mogherini and Commissioner Hahn confirmed the EU and the Eastern partners' commitments, as well as the fact that the EU partnership remains high in the priorities of the EU external policy. Through this event, we send a clear message of the continued relevance of this program. On one hand, the attention to growing differentiation and the individual approach to partners were praised, while on the other, insufficient strategic communication was brought up as a lasting deficiency by our partners. The meeting also stressed that the EU institutions see the current phase of relationships as mainly practical daily cooperation between the EU and the partners. The informal political discussion could be summed up in 3 key conclusions. First, the current priority of the program is the continuation of substantive cooperation with our partners. This means support for reforms, infrastructure projects, energy, mobility, scholarships, and business opportunities. Second, the EU must take the remaining steps to grant visa-free status to Georgia and Ukraine. This issue has become a more of a matter of credibility for the EU. And third, the Eastern Partnership Summit in 2017 should set its new political course, otherwise the program will really lose its relevance. Slovakia believes that the preparation process for the next summit will provide an excellent opportunity to thoroughly discuss how to best address the ambitions of those Eastern partners who already met the current political benchmarks of this format. The last ministerial meeting of the Eastern partners, organized by our presidency, took place just last week. On 18th of October, the EU and the Eastern partner countries' ministers for environment met together in Luxembourg to discuss the important topics of environment and climate changes. It was the very first meeting of this format. It helped not only to identify opportunities for cooperation of the 28 plus 6 countries, together with the EU institutions, in the management of environment and ecologically friendly economy. It also adopted a joint declaration confirming commitments to enhance sectorial cooperation in order to protect the environment, focusing on the implementation of the UN SDGs and the commitments of the Paris Climate Change Agreement. Let me take a few minutes to present the Slovak view on relations between the EU and Ukraine. The EU has been developing intensive relations with Ukraine. We are interested to have a stable, secure, and prosperous neighbor at our eastern border. Relations between Ukraine and the European Union were so far shaped through the European neighborhood policy. However, the EU is trying to build a closer relationship with Ukraine, going beyond cooperation, stressing gradual economic integration and deepening political cooperation. On January 1st, 2016, the Association Agreement, the deep and comprehensive free trade area between Ukraine and the EU, entered into force. We do hope that the ratification process will be completed in the near future. The people of Ukraine have been demanding from their governments deep changes. This notion has driven both dramatic standpoints in the country's modern history, which are the Orange Revolution and the Maidan. The implementation of reforms represents a critical feature for a stable future of Ukraine. To this end, even the Association Agreement, the deep and comprehensive free trade area alone, gives no guarantee. It rather provides us with legal framework and mechanisms to work closely together. The European Union is well positioned to help Ukraine co-navigate through its transition waters. To do this efficiently, there is still a solid room for better coordination, and our collective efforts must be aimed at maximizing the overall effect. Since the signature of the EU Association Agreement in 2014, Ukraine has made progress in adoption and implementation of reforms. It has passed a number of important laws. Let me just mention the judicial sector, where steps were made to move towards an independent and effective judiciary. New institutions in the anti-corruption field have been established. These are National Anti-Corruption Bureau, National Agency for the Prevention of Corruption, the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecution Office. I must admit, there are still many challenges ahead. Ukraine requires a systemic reform of public administration as the foundation for any other reforms. Ukraine is undertaking difficult but necessary steps to modernize its civil service and to make government more effective, transparent, and responsive to the demands of its own citizens. It is an uneasy and challenging task to rebuild the bureaucratic system on the move. However, there is no time to wait until this process is fully complete. Productivity of reforms must be verified through monitoring of achievement and specific results. Ladies and gentlemen, the Ukrainian government managed to stabilize its microfinancial situation. There are still huge challenges left in reforming the pension systems, in improving governance of state-owned enterprises, in preparation of the ground for an open and transparent privatization, in the agricultural sector, in the banking sector, but there has been done a lot already in the banking sector. The energy sector needs to be reformed further, and it is important that the reforms should become irreversible. Ukraine needs to continue the privatization of energy companies, together with unbundling, in order to improve the efficiency and actively fight corruption. Gas reform is probably the most important one in the Ukrainian economy. Ukraine's gas sector is the most unreformed, highly monopolized, and non-transparent part of the economy. Unfortunately, it is characterized by extensive corruption. The privatization of this sector will attract investment, which have been lacking investments for many years, and improve the quality of services. It also may be one of the solutions which would eliminate the possibility of construction another alternative gas transport line. Reforms are rather political than economic process. They should be based on economic freedom, liberalization, deregulation, privatization, structural reforms, and macroeconomic stabilization. Ukraine has done more over the past 2 years than in the previous 24, yet it is not enough. The point of no return for reforms has not yet been reached, and the reversal is still imminent and possible. Here in Slovakia, we understand how important the visa liberalization is for the citizens of Ukraine. This great enabler of people-to-people contacts is an important symbol of improved EU-Ukraine relations. The Visa Liberalization Action Plan for Ukraine was presented in 2010. However, the significant progress was only achieved mainly after February 2014. Thanks to immense effort of Ukraine, the European Commission proposed the visa liberalization for Ukrainian citizens on the 20th April 2016. Following this proposal, the European Parliament Committee, LIBE, voted in favor of visa liberalization at the end of September. Now, it is up to the EU member states to endorse the liberalization. There are two aspects to the issue. First is the general atmosphere regarding migration. EU member states are quite hesitant to make any significant changes. Second issue is connected with Ukraine directly. Part of member states still have doubts that Ukraine has fulfilled all the benchmarks. Issue of fight against corruption are raised quite often. It must be proven that the reforms are effective and sustainable. Ukraine must now make sure that there is no reason not to support the visa liberalization. Ukraine must focus on communication with the EU member states, and frequent reports about problems in functioning of the anti-corruption institutions are definitely not very helpful. Let me also say a few words on the EU-Russia relations. Trust between Russia and the EU is still absent. It is hard to expect radical positive changes in the meantime. We should work step by step on the increase of predictability, transparency, and openness in our relations with Russia through political dialogue and proactive approach in discussions on issues of interest. We should also consider the possibility of pragmatic discussion on cooperation with the Euro-Asian Economic Union. A good option of a step-by-step approach could be selective sectorial cooperation in sectors that are of our interest. In some areas, for example migration, we also have to put more effort to explain EU realities, as it was the case of Frontex. We need to find ways how to enforce cooperation of people-to-people contact and continue in cooperation in the field of education and culture. Irrespective of the state of play of our relations, it is essential to maintain an open dialogue with Russia. EU relations with Russia cannot be separated to issues of cooperation and competition. Nevertheless, our primary interest is that the EU eastern border is indeed stable and secure. Here I would like to conclude my speech, and I would like to wish our Eastern partners the very best success on their path to come closer to the European Union. I hope you'll have a fruitful discussion today, and I thank you for your attention.